With Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth back with you on America's Forum, and this is a troubling situation, Miranda. Christians in Iraq are on the verge of extinction.
Yeah, this according to a report from the 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative that says the group is under threat of genocide from ISIS.
For more on this, let's go back to Newsmax Washington. Of course, Ford O'Connell, our co-host this hour, and going in depth is my old colleague from Congress, now former Congressman Frank Wolf, co-founder of the Wilberforce Initiative. Frank, it is so good to have you here, and I understand you're just back from Iraq. Paint the picture for us for Christians living in that troubled region.
Well, it's very bleak. Christians and Yazidis, there is genocide taking place. It meets the definition of Raphael Lemkin, the definition of genocide, and I think the world has to face it. You know, more biblical history took place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than Israel. Abraham's from Iraq, Rebecca lived in Iraq, Esther was from Iraq, the 12 tribes of Israel lived in Iraq, Daniel was buried in Iraq, Jonah's tomb was just blown up in Iraq, and yet we see the Christian community, mainly Catholic, the Syrian Chaldean, some evangelicals, literally being slaughtered, and we see the genocide taking place against the Yazidis, and the world is relatively quiet about it. And secondly, I hate to say this, but I think ISIS is winning. And I think unless they are stopped, you may have seen the reports that came out, there are well over 140 Americans that have tried to go over. Some have been successful to go over there and fight with ISIS. There are over 3,000 Westerners, and they all have the visa waiver program, can come here. So the other side of the coin, one, there's genocide for Christians and Yazidis, and we are literally going to see the end of Christianity in that region. And secondly, ISIS is on the move, totally committed, and they have better weapons, better training than the Peshmerga and the Iraqis who are fighting them.
Congressman Wolf, some would argue that basically the persecution of Christians in Iraq's been going on long before ISIS. In 2003, there were 1.5 million Christians. Today, there's about 300,000. Well, that means we had to be losing a lot of Christians long before ISIS came along. Obviously, ISIS would like to finish the job off, but this has been going on in Iraq long before ISIS. What do you think is contributing to that?
Because this is now in northern Iraq, it's up in the Kurdish area. It's what they call the Nineveh Plain, you know, from the Bible, Jonah and Nineveh. This is the Nineveh Plain, which is mainly Christian and Yazidis. ISIS has come into that region. We met with nuns and others who told us that, you know, when they were Christian, they either had to pay a tax, they had to convert. Only a handful converted, very, very few, or they had to leave. So now they're living in refugee camps. They are afraid to go into the other refugee camps. So I think it is literally the end almost of a strong Christian movement. You're right. Before the war, there was 1.5 million Christians. They're down to roughly 300,000. 12 families a day leave. And so we are basically seeing almost the end. As you know, out in the region, there's a saying, first the Saturday people, and then the Sunni people. The Saturday people are the Jewish community. In 1950, the Jewish population of Iraq was roughly 150,000. Now they're down to under 6 individuals, 7 individuals. And the same thing is taking place to the Christian community. There'll probably always be a remnant, but these people are living in dire conditions. The stories we heard, I won't go into them, are just are heartbreaking, and yet we also see the same group that's doing that on the move. We see Paul could not go to Damascus, on the road to Damascus to straight street. We see all these countries are falling apart, and the ISIS forces, they are highly skilled. You know, when the Iraqi army was disbanded, many of them have now joined ISIS. They get good weapons. They have American-made weapons. They took the weapons from the Iraqis when the Iraqis ran. The Peshmerga and others fighting them have old weapons, sometimes 30 and 40, and we're losing the battle, and yet we're losing Christianity in that region.
Frank, there's a lot to this story. That's why we want to continue talking about it on the other side of the break. A very disturbing story out of the Middle East, the persecution, the extinction of Christians. And we'll talk more about it after this. Alongside Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth here on the anchor desk for America's Forum. From Newsmax Washington, our co-host this hour, Ford O'Connell, and former Congressman Frank Wolf, the co-founder of the 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative. Miranda, I think you had a question for Frank.
Yeah, I did. Congressman, could you share some of your examples with our audience of things that you witnessed during your recent trip?
Well, we interviewed over about 75 people. We interviewed nuns, and keep in mind, the Christian community in Iraq speak Aramaic. They speak the same language as Jesus. But the stories were horrific of people losing their children, mortars coming in, ISIS coming in. We spoke to one man who said his wife had cancer, breast cancer. ISIS took over the town, Mosul. When they went to the hospital for treatment for his wife, they said unless he converted and his wife converted, they would not treat him. Neither converted. Of course, his wife has later died. We met with Yazidis who had come down from Sinjar Mountain to talk to us, and some of the young girls, the stories that they told, which I won't get into today, are too graphic, but hundreds of Yazidi girls have been taken away. They said they were separated according to the color of their eyes. They were forced to marry some of these guys. And so the stories are horrific, and it meets the definition of genocide. This is genocide. And of course, we have a Holocaust museum that says never again. And we just celebrated the 70th anniversary of the Auschwitz genocide Holocaust, and yet it's taking place again. And so the world will have to deal with this and say, you got to, the UN has to deal with it, the United States has to deal with it. And I think religious leaders have to speak out. I've been very appreciative
Congressman, you make a great point
Francis
right
speaking
there.
out.
Congressman, you make a great point, and that is we've had a steep decline in religious fervor over the past 15 years, particularly on the Judeo-Christian side in the United States and Europe. Do you think that that is contributing to the fact that the world is largely turning a blind eye to what's happened in terms of Judeo-Christian persecution in Iraq?
Yes, I do. I think we need people, and I appreciate Pope Francis speaking out. He's been very bold, and there have been some, but if you ever read Martin Luther King, a speech from the Birmingham jail, how he expressed disappointment with the church for not advocating and being with them. And I think we need Martin Luther King Jr.'s, and we need Dietrich Bonhoeffer's, and we need people in the church to speak out, because otherwise, on our watch, genocide will be taking place. And not only genocide, the group that is committing the genocide will be coming to the West to kill us. And so this is a totally committed group of people who are highly trained, highly skilled. You saw the number coming from America. We never thought we'd ever see this. They have a sophisticated internet program. They have a sophisticated, Anwar al-Awlaki, basically with his magazine Inspire, got the colonel, the major down in Fort Hood to kill Americans there. We see what's taking place. So this threatens the homeland. And in addition to that, we are seeing Christians and Yazidis being relatively eliminated from that part of the region.
And we have Barack Obama as commander-in-chief. He offered now an infamous lecture last week at the prayer breakfast comparing the Crusades of, 800 to 1,000 years ago to the Islamic terror atrocities of today. Will this president intervene and help stop this persecution?
Well, I think the administration has been relatively weak. They have been standing by. If you heard the president a couple of months ago, he said Yemen was an example of how successful they had been. We just closed the American embassy down in Yemen. You had the administration talking about what was taking place in Nigeria. Hashtag bring back our girls. Boko Haram now has taken over large portions of Nigeria, and the administration has been relatively silent. You have Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and the administration pretends it wasn't there. And you have every day we refuse to act and do something, ISIS gains more territory. These are committed killers. They want to come to the West and they want to kill us.
And on that somber note,
and Congress is failing. Not only the administration, but also Congress.
We will continue to keep an eye on it. Frank Wolf, you have our thanks for your insights. Hashtags don't answer the kind of hatred we're seeing in this kind of persecution. Back with more on America's Forum.